Hey everyone, good to see you this week. We are rolling towards the end of the semester. Can you believe it? I can hardly believe it. It is this week we are talking about chapter 11 and chapter 14, which in general is talking about the sexual body in various states of health and illness, what happens when our body is well, but dysfunctioning, or what happens when our body is less than sort of what we think of as wellness, and how does that affect our sexuality and other sort of things. So first I want to talk a lot about body image. This is something that I'm passionate about. And when we talk about sort of body image in this class, a lot of it we talk about through the sort of critique of media and feminism, and talking about how the media and society in general tells us to hate our bodies, right? It tells us our bodies are too fat, too ugly, too dark, too light, too all the things that are wrong with us. And not surprisingly, we also have realize that this heavy focus sort of on bodies for both men, women, and people of all genders, we know that one of the biggest side effects of body focused sort of commentary and imagery in our society is the rise of disordered eating. Disordered eating habits are things such as anorexia, bulimia, binge eating, steroid use, compulsive exercising, those sort of things. People who are really self-absorbed with their bodies and their body image oftentimes retreat from their sexuality because they're so hyper-focused on what their body looks like and not how their body works. And so one of the things that we know is that part of a better society, of having a healthy body image, would be to have less people having problems with disordered eating habits and other sort of things. We know that disordered eating has increased over the past century. Not surprisingly, as coincided with media and sort of contemporary standards of what is hot or sexy or all these other sort of things. The lecture has some statistics and other sort of things that are relevant for a number of eating disorders. Eating disorders, for the most part, are affecting sort of all races and all genders. And so that's a really important sort of thing that we should take notice of, which is another reason why I have such a heavy focus sort of on media critique in this class. I think it's a really important sort of thing. Another thing that we've talked about previously is that people who get older don't stop having sex, right? We know old people have sex, but that doesn't mean that it isn't unencumbered in some sort of way. We know that as you get older, your body changes, and as you have body changes, sometimes you have to adapt to that body and to be able to do different sort of things. And so sometimes we have different sort of mobility issues or dexterity issues or stretchiness or all those sort of things. But we also know that as we age, we get a lot more chronic health conditions. We know that rates of cancers rise as we get older. Menopause, male prostate sort of issues, other sort of things start to increase as we get older, and that's just part of life. Too bad we can't escape that. One in particular that I always like to talk about is thinking about cancer, and how does cancer diagnosis and affect somebody in terms of their sexual health, right? Well, first there's the sort of obvious of, if you have cancer, you don't feel good, right? And so if you don't feel good, that's generally not something that gets the sexy juices flowing. For another, there's this idea that you are this sick person, right? And for a lot of people, their partners start to treat them like a sick person, and then they worry about, oh, can you do this? These sort of things. Well, if somebody's always caretaking you and worrying that they're hurting you, again, not something that is super sexy for a lot of people. Body image issues can come up, right? If we think about sort of cancer, it can affect different sort of reproductive organs, but also just in general, cancer treatment can either make you very, very thin, but not like in a nice sort of society way, but in a like rail thin, you look like there's something wrong with you. Or some treatments such as radiation or other sort of steroid treatments can make you really, really puffy and gain weight. And so sometimes you have body issues that are related to these sort of things that are happening. And then there's bigger picture worries, right? If you have cancer, you're thinking about dying and bigger picture issue. Can I have children? All these sort of things. And again, those things can have a really big impact both on yourself and within the context of a relationship. Another area that I think is really important that we focus on is sex and disability. I think that is one of the most overlooked areas, in addition to sort of sex in older people, which is one of my other passions. Sex and disability is a really important issue that we often overlook. We often see disabled people sort of as this disembodied sexual person. And as I've said before in my lectures, everyone is born a sexual being. Yes, even people with disabilities, whether those are physical disabilities or mental disabilities, whether those are other sort of body issues. All of those things doesn't mean anybody is not a sexual being. And so we need to think about people with disabilities and how do we integrate them into sex education, into talking about sexuality. There's some great videos and links this week for you to be able to look at sort of this particular area of study that is oftentimes overlooked in classes. Now, our next sort of chapter is around sexual function and dysfunction. I'll freely admit this is one of my least favorite chapters because so much of it is heavily skewed by sort of media bias and ideas of society and contemporary culture. Sexual dysfunction is very, very real. Lots of people will have both physical and physiological issues that will have an impact on their sexuality. However, society is also super dysfunctional. And so when we have a dysfunctional society, oftentimes that makes us have more dysfunction in our lives as we relate to sort of social constructs of sexiness and ideas and these sort of things. The book does a good job of talking about the different aspects of sexual function, what you can do in those sort of realms. But one of the things I want you to do this week is to watch a documentary that takes a bigger picture sort of look at the idea of sexual dysfunction. And it talks much more about the societal impacts of what we think about dysfunction. Is it a socially constructed sort of thing? How do we separate sort of the medical side from the socially constructed side? The movie is called Orgasm Inc. It's one of my very favorite documentaries, and I think you'll enjoy it. It's freely available on YouTube, and I think you'll have a good time watching that. So that is all. Short lecture this week. Tried to keep it short for you since you have a lot of videos to watch. Just a reflection due by Friday, and have a good weekend. Bye.